My husband left me in the rain to teach me a lesson. And for a second, I believed him. I just stood there, watching the taillights of his car disappear down the empty highway, the droplets turning into a torrent, washing away any dignity I had left. He thought he was teaching me about power, about knowing my place. What he didn't know was that my family was already waiting, but not for me. If you've ever felt small, controlled, or like you were a pawn in someone else's game, hit that like button. It's free, and it helps people who need to hear this story find it. My name is Grace, and this is the story of how my life became a war that I didn't even know I was fighting. It all started with a simple dinner, a cold conversation, and a lie I'd been living for 3 years. Liam had just closed the biggest deal of his career, a 7-figure fund for his so-called venture capital firm. He was riding high. We had dinner at Morton's, his favorite, the same place we went on our first date. He talked about himself the entire time, about the long hours, the sacrifices, the pressure. When I asked him if we could talk about something else, something us, his smile just froze. "We are talking about us, Grace," he said, taking a sip of his Cabernet. "Our life, our future. I'm building this empire for us." The word us tasted like a lie on his tongue. He never saw me as a partner. He saw me as an accessory. 3 hours later, he was throwing me out of his car. The rain was hammering against the windshield, a rhythmic drumbeat of fury that matched the one inside my chest. I'd seen his cruelty before, in the way he'd undermine me in front of friends or call my family naive, but this was different. This was pure, theatrical malice. "You need a lesson, Grace," he said, not even looking at me. "Walking home might teach you some respect." I didn't argue. I just got out and let the storm swallow me whole. He didn't care that it was 37 miles from our home or that the rest stop was desolate. All he cared about was proving a point. He thought he was the hero of his own story, an invincible master of the universe. What he never, ever expected was that my family was already waiting, and his little game was just the first move in a much bigger, much more dangerous chess match. As I watched his car disappear, a black sedan with tinted windows pulled up behind me, silent as a ghost. A text message flashed on my phone, not from Liam, but from an unknown number. "Don't speak. Don't acknowledge us. We're watching you. We're all watching you." My heart hammered against my ribs, not from the cold, but from a new kind of fear. A fear that my life had been a lie, that Liam was a different kind of monster than I ever imagined. He was just a pawn, and the true masterminds were standing right here in the rain with me. The last thing I saw before the car pulled away was the reflection of my own face on the window. It was a face I didn't recognize. Not the broken wife he wanted me to be, but the face of a soldier who had just stumbled onto a battlefield. This was the moment I realized my family was already waiting for a war, not to save me, but to win. They say your family is supposed to be your safety net, the one place you can fall without hitting the ground. For me, my family was more like a high-wire act with no net at all. You see, my last name is Harrison, in Boston. That name isn't just a name, it's a legacy. A century-old, old money. We built this city kind of legacy. We're in finance, of course. My father, my grandfather, and my older brother, Alex. All of them are legends in their own right. The kind of men who talk about hedge funds at the dinner table and treat their emotions like bad investments, something to be liquidated immediately. I was the exception. The black sheep, The artsy one who wanted to read books instead of balance sheets. The one who fell in love with a charming, charismatic outsider. Liam. He wasn't from Boston. He didn't understand the unwritten rules of our world. Or so I thought. He was the son of a Chicago real estate developer. And he had this fiery, ambitious drive that my family, especially my father, saw as dangerous. My father didn't get Liam's vision, didn't get his common background. My brother Alex, who was groomed from birth to take over the family empire, saw Liam as a threat to his authority. From the very beginning, Liam played the role of the devoted outsider. He would tell me things like, "Your family's world is so suffocating. Grace, it's like a gilded cage. I want to build a life where we can breathe." He made me feel like he was saving me from them. He promised me a life of pure freedom, a life where our success was our own, not inherited. It was an alluring fantasy and a perfect lie. I was so ready to believe it. I was so tired of being seen as the spare, the daughter who would never be as sharp as her brother, as cunning as her father. I was desperate to prove to my family that my happiness was worth more than their approval. When I told my father I was leaving my job at the firm to marry Liam and move to Minnesota, he didn't scream or shout. He just said, "Grace, you're making a grave mistake. He's not one of us. He will not protect you." Alex, my rock-steady older brother, just looked at me with a chilling calm. "When you fall, don't expect a hand from us to pull you back up. You left?" And so I left. I cut ties completely. No more family dinners, no more phone calls, no more holidays. It was my choice, my freedom. At least, that's what I told myself. For the first year, it was perfect. Liam was everything I had dreamed of. He was warm, supportive, and he made me feel like the most important person in the world. But then, things started to change. He began to talk about my family constantly, always in a tone of dismissive superiority. "They're so old-fashioned. Grace, they'll never survive in the new market. Your brother's a dinosaur, just like your father." I didn't see it then. But he wasn't trying to protect me from them. He was trying to poison me against them, to isolate me. My own ambitions started to feel small in his presence. My desire to work in the arts, to paint, to write, became a hobby in his eyes. He slowly convinced me to give up my personal savings for his startup. My confidence, my voice, my independence, all of it slowly eroded, replaced by a constant feeling that I needed to be smaller, quieter, and more grateful. I convinced myself that this was the price of freedom, the price of love. I had to let go of my past to fully embrace my future with him. I had to trust his vision completely. But the truth was, I wasn't free at all. I was just living in a different kind of cage, one that was far more sinister than the one I had left behind. Because while I was so busy looking forward, I failed to see the warning signs. The way he would get agitated when I mentioned a family acquaintance. The way he would suddenly hang up the phone when I walked into the room. He wasn't just controlling me, he was hiding a secret. A secret that would one day put a knife in my back. A secret that would make me long for the cold, hard reality of my family's world. Because at least in their world, you knew exactly where you stood. That's the funny thing about gaslighting. It's like a slow poison. You don't see it happening at first. It just seeps in. And before you know it, you're looking at your own reflection and wondering who that person is. For me, that process started with Liam's work. He was a master at blurring the lines between my money and his. "It's all our money. Grace," he'd say with that charming smile. My success is your success. So when he needed my entire life savings for a seed investment, it felt like the most logical thing in the world. He was building our future. How could I say no? I just signed the papers, handed over my financial independence, and watched him walk away with a confidence I hadn't felt in years. Then came the little things. I'd noticed money was missing from our joint account in strange, round numbers. Liam, what was this $10,000 withdrawal for? I'd ask. He'd look at me with such genuine surprise. Grace, we talked about this. It was for the new server for the office. Remember I showed you the proposal last month? My mind would race. Had I just forgotten he was so convincing, so calm, that I'd start to believe I was losing my mind? And then Jessica appeared, my cousin. She had always been the black sheep of our family, even more than me. She was a wild child, a free spirit, and I had always felt a fierce need to protect her. So when she showed up in Minnesota, saying she needed a place to crash and a fresh start, I welcomed her with open arms. She was the one family tie I still had. I thought she was a blessing. I didn't know she was a viper. Jessica was so supportive, so seemingly on my side. Liam is so dedicated, she'd say, all wide-eyed admiration. He's so different from the other men you've dated. Grace, he really sees you. She'd reinforce his narratives, praising his ambition and making me feel stupid for ever questioning him. But then, I'd catch them. Little things. A quick, conspiratorial glance across a room. A text message notification on Liam's phone that would light up with a name I didn't recognize, and he'd snatch it away so fast I barely saw it. One night, I walked into the kitchen and found them laughing, heads together over Liam's laptop, and they both went silent the second I entered. The room suddenly felt charged with a different kind of energy, and I felt a cold dread creep into my gut. I wanted to say something. I wanted to ask, "What are you two plotting?" But I couldn't. I was afraid of his reaction. He had trained me to be afraid. He had trained me to believe that my questions were a sign of paranoia, a sign of my unstable nature. He told me that my family and my old life had made me a suspicious, difficult person. And the worst part, Jessica, the one person I thought I could trust, was validating his every word. I started to feel like I was going crazy. I began writing things down. Little details, dates, times, money withdrawals. My hand would shake as I scrawled notes into a small journal hidden under my mattress. I was building a case against my own husband, but I didn't even know why. I just had to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind, that my gut feeling was right, that there was something dark and twisted happening right under my nose. I didn't know that my small act of rebellion, my desperate need for truth, would soon lead to a storm far more dangerous than anything I could imagine. But I knew this much: the more they tried to control me, the more I became determined to find out what they were hiding. I just didn't know that my search for the truth would lead to a much bigger lie. The turning point in my life, the moment everything shattered, didn't happen in a courthouse or in an emotional showdown. It happened in our kitchen, over a cup of lukewarm coffee and the cold light of a laptop screen. I'd been awake for hours, my stomach in knots. I couldn't stop thinking about the numbers, the strange withdrawals, that feeling of dread I couldn't shake. I knew I had to get answers, even if they were answers I didn't want. So, when Liam came downstairs, I was ready. "Liam," I started, trying to keep my voice steady. "I was looking at our account this morning. I don't understand the $100,000 withdrawal from last week. You said it was a client investment, but it went into a personal account, and it's gone." He didn't look up from his phone. "It's all handled. Grace, stop worrying." "I can't just stop worrying. This is our money. I have a right to know where it's going." He finally looked at me, and his smile, the one that had fooled me for years, was gone. His eyes were cold, like chips of ice. "Our money. You've had your chance to understand our money. You're an artist. Grace, you don't understand things like this? Leave the business to me." "I understand $100,000, I said, my voice rising. "It's a lot of money, more than just a simple investment." Liam closed his laptop with a loud snap. "This conversation is over. You're becoming unhinged. Grace, you're acting just like your family." He threw that in my face like a poison dart. He knew that was my biggest fear, becoming a person my family would be proud of, a person he could no longer control. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Jessica, my cousin, a picture of her and Liam in Paris. My heart dropped into my stomach. It wasn't just a casual selfie. They were standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, holding hands, her head resting on his shoulder. My mind flashed back to the business trip Liam had taken last month. The late nights, the closed office doors, the hushed whispers. Everything clicked into place. The whispers weren't about business. They were about me. "You're a hypocrite, Liam. It's not about money. It's about you. It's about what you've been doing with Jessica, isn't it?" I said, shoving my phone into his face. His calm demeanor vanished. His face went from pale to beet red in a second. He was caught. "What were you thinking?" "Liam," I cried. "After all the sacrifices I've made for you, after all the times I trusted you, you went behind my back with my own cousin. Are you a monster?" My voice cracked, but my anger was taking over. I could feel the rage building inside of me. I had to know the truth. "What have you two been doing?" He let out a short, ugly laugh. "What were we doing? We were saving our lives from your pathetic excuse for a family. Your sacrifices were a joke. Grace, you gave up a life of inherited wealth and privilege for a nobody like me who came from nothing. What did you think was going to happen? You can't just escape the game like that. You were always a pawn in my game and your family's. Jessica and I were working together to seize what was rightfully ours. We deserve your family's money more than you do." His words hit me like a physical blow, a pawn in his game. I felt my legs weaken as the air was sucked out of my lungs. It wasn't just about an affair or stolen money anymore. It was about a calculated, cruel plot to destroy me. Jessica wasn't just a friend. She was an accomplice. And Liam didn't love me. He despised me. He grabbed my coat off the hook by the door. "Get out. Grace, we're done talking. You don't get to ruin this for me." He shoved me out into the pouring rain. "You can walk back and think about how you ruined your life. And while you do, know this, I'm taking everything you have, everything you gave up for me, everything your family could have given you, and it's all going to be ours." The rain was cold, and the wind was cruel, but the cold was nothing compared to the shock of his words. I had a family that had disowned me, a husband who was a stranger, and a cousin who was a viper. I thought my whole world had come to an end, that I had lost everything. But what I didn't know was that while I was standing there, defeated, the true game was only just beginning. I was shivering, soaked to the bone, and staring into the headlights of that black sedan. For a second, A terrifying second. I thought it was Liam coming back to finish the job, but the car just sat there, engine idling, its presence both a comfort and a threat. And then the door opened. A tall figure stepped out, holding a large, black umbrella. His face was obscured by the shadows and the rain. But I knew him. I knew the way he carried himself. It was Alex, my older brother. I didn't move. My mind raced back to his last words to me years ago. When you fall, don't expect a hand from us to pull you back up. You left. He wasn't supposed to be here. None of them were. Grace, he said, his voice calm and measured, cutting through the drumming rain. Get in the car. He didn't offer a hug or a word of comfort, just a simple order. It was so like him. I hesitated, but the cold was an unbearable weight. I was a puppet, and he was pulling the strings. I got in. The interior of the car was warm and smelled faintly of leather and coffee. A bottle of water and a blanket were waiting for me on the seat. The phone you have is being monitored, he said, never once looking at me. Give it to me. I handed it over, and he immediately shattered it, dropping the pieces into a small bag. He then placed a new phone in my hand, still in its box. This one's clean. Use it only when I tell you. The silence that followed was suffocating. I wanted to scream at him, to ask him why he was here, why he was acting like nothing had happened. But a new kind of fear was settling in. This wasn't about a husband's petty cruelty anymore. This was a whole different level of cold, calculated precision. It wasn't just your money, Grace, he said, as if reading my mind. He finally turned to look at me, and his eyes were full of a chilling, dangerous calm. Liam was taking money from a private equity fund that our family manages. He was in deeper than we thought, skimming from multiple clients, including our old business partner, Mr. Anderson, your cousin. Jessica was his accomplice. She's been feeding him inside information from my office for months. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. It wasn't just my life savings. It was my family's legacy. A chilling thought crossed my mind. This wasn't a rescue mission. This was a business transaction. He wasn't here to save me from Liam. He was here to save the family name. It gets worse, Alex continued, his voice monotone. We have reason to believe that Liam's father, who is now the silent partner of his firm, has been using him as a pawn in a larger scheme to destroy our family's reputation. Your marriage wasn't just an escape, it was a Trojan horse. The weight of his words hit me like a tidal wave. For the past 3 years, I had been an unwitting pawn in a war between my family and my husband's family. I wasn't just a wife who had been betrayed. I was a tool. My anger shifted from Liam to a larger, more menacing target. They had used my love for Liam as a weapon against my family, and my family had used me as a weapon against Liam. I was just a pawn in their cruel game of chess. So you're here to... What? I finally managed to say, my voice trembling. Arrest him. We've already done that, he said, turning back to the road. His office has been raided. All his assets are frozen. The lawsuit has been filed. He doesn't know what's coming for him. We've been planning this for months. He paused, looking at me for a long, cold second. We'll be meeting with our legal team in the morning. And you, Grace, are going to be our most powerful witness. You're going to tell them everything. You're going to tell them what you've been through. He wasn't asking. He was telling me. And for the first time in years, a feeling I hadn't felt in a long, long time came rushing back to me. It wasn't love. It wasn't fear. It was a cold, hard resolve. They had used me, both of them. And now, I was going to use them back. I was going to get revenge not for myself, but for every victim they had exploited. And in that moment, in the warmth of the car, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt alive. I felt ready for battle. The next morning, the world didn't look the same. The sky wasn't just gray. It was a cold, indifferent slate. The rain had stopped, but inside me, the storm was just getting started. Alex had driven me to a sleek, modern law office in downtown Minneapolis. I felt like a different person walking in. The traumatized wife was gone. The vengeful pawn was born. Inside. Alex introduced me to a team of lawyers and forensic accountants. They had been working in secret for months, a silent army building a case against Liam. They laid out the facts on a giant conference table, and for the first time, I saw the full picture of their betrayal. Liam's family wasn't just a rival. They were a corporate raider, using my marriage to infiltrate our family's network. And Jessica. She was the sleeper agent, the one who earned my trust, only to report every move I made. They had used me to gain access to our family's private financial data, planning to drain the inheritance fund I didn't even know existed. We spent the morning rehearsing my testimony, going over every detail of Liam's gaslighting and his betrayal. The lawyers wanted me to look broken, to tell the story of a shattered wife. But I couldn't. The rage inside me was too big. When we arrived at the courthouse, I saw him. Liam was standing in the hall, looking nervous. He was on the phone, his face pale and clammy. His eyes darted around the room, full of a panicked energy I had never seen before. He was no longer the confident, charming man who had abandoned me in the rain. He was a scared child, a puppet whose strings had been cut. And then I saw her, Jessica. She was standing at the end of the hall, her phone pressed to her ear, looking just as panicked as he was. When she saw me, her eyes widened. She tried to give me a look of apology, but I didn't return it. I just looked at her, my eyes cold as a frozen lake. She was not a victim. She was a collaborator. "All rise," the bailiff announced. The courtroom was packed. Every eye was on Liam, but I didn't look at him. I looked at the judge. She was a woman with a face as hard and cold as stone, a woman who looked like she had seen it all. I took a deep breath, and I began to speak. My voice was calm, composed. I told them everything. I told them about the gaslighting, the stolen money, the fake business trips, and the betrayal with my own cousin. I told them about the way he'd used me as a pawn in his game. I told them about the way he'd left me in the rain. I looked at Liam, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine fear in his eyes. "And do you have any evidence to support your claims?" the judge asked. Alex stood up and presented a folder full of documents. The lawyers had everything, every transaction, every email, every text message. They even had a transcript of a conversation between Liam and Jessica, where they had discussed my family's financial secrets. I heard Jessica's voice, full of excitement, as she described her plan to take down my family, and Liam's voice, laughing, saying, "You're a brilliant little monster. Jess!" Liam's face went from pale to red to white. He was sweating, shaking. His carefully constructed life was falling apart. He looked at Jessica, a pleading look on his face, but she just turned away. Then, the judge asked the question that I'd been waiting for. "Mr. Harrison, You have been accused of abandoning your wife in a dangerous situation. Did you do this?" Liam's lawyer stood up, but Liam silenced him. He looked at me, a flicker of his old arrogance in his eyes. "I didn't abandon her. I just gave her a lesson in life, a lesson she obviously needed." The judge looked at him, her eyes as cold as mine. "Is that all you have to say, Mr. Harrison?" "Yes," he said, his voice full of pride. And that was it. That was the moment he lost everything. Not because of my testimony, not because of the evidence, but because he was still living in his own lie. He still believed he was the hero of his own story. He was a monster who thought he was a god, but he was just a man. A very, very foolish man. I watched as the police led him away in handcuffs. He looked at me one last time, a look of pure hatred on his face. I didn't flinch. I just stood there, my head held high. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor, and I was ready to face the world on my own terms. The morning air inside the courthouse was heavy, smelling of old paper and stale coffee. It was all a cold, calculated performance, and I was stepping onto the stage for the final act. I had prepared for this moment for weeks, but nothing could have prepared me for the sight of Liam. He looked small, insignificant, his arrogance stripped away like a mask. I took the stand, my hand steady on the Bible. The bailiff asked me to state my name, and for a second, I felt like a stranger. Grace. Grace Mitchell, I said. A name that suddenly felt like a lie. My lawyer, a brilliant, calm woman from my family's firm, began her questioning. She led me through my testimony, from the early days of gaslighting to the discovery of the fraudulent transactions to the final, cruel act of abandonment. My voice was calm, composed, even when I spoke of the most painful moments. I was a witness, not a victim. Liam's lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit, stood to cross-examine me. His voice was a sneer. "Mrs. Mitchell," he began, "you claim that your husband abandoned you in the rain. Is it not true that you had a public and highly volatile argument with your husband, threatening to reveal his business dealings to the authorities?" "No," I replied, looking him straight in the eye. "My husband told me he was leaving me there as a lesson. He said he was taking everything I had. I simply reacted to the truth he was revealing. And isn't it true that your family has a long and bitter history with Mr. Mitchell's family, that your father and brother have been trying to ruin his career for years? He was trying to paint me as a pawn in their game, a vindictive ex-wife with a family vendetta. But I wasn't just a pawn anymore. I was a player. My family has a long history of protecting their assets from outside threats," I said, my voice steady. "They have a history of foresight, something I, unfortunately, did not inherit." A small gasp went through the courtroom. Liam's lawyer's face twitched, but he didn't falter. "And what about your cousin, Jessica? You were living with her. You were close. Did you not have a falling out with her over a personal matter? Perhaps a man—" He was trying to push me to the breaking point, to get me to admit that my cousin and I had a petty fight over a man, to make me seem like a jealous, unstable woman. "No," I said, my voice flat. "There was no falling out. Jessica was an accomplice to Liam. She was his eyes and ears in our family. She fed him information so they could both try to steal from me and my family's trust fund." The lawyer scoffed. "These are baseless allegations, Mrs. Mitchell." "They're not," I replied, a small smile playing on my lips. We have the proof. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small black flash drive. We have recordings of conversations between Liam and my cousin, where they discuss their plot to take down my family and steal our inheritance. The courtroom fell silent. Liam's face went from pale to ashen. His lawyer was pale, his eyes wide with shock. He had no idea what was on that drive. Liam looked at me, a silent, pleading look in his eyes. He had been so sure I had nothing. The judge ordered the recording to be played. Liam's voice filled the courtroom, cold and clear. She's so pathetic. She gave up everything for me. I'm going to take all of her family's money, and she'll be left with nothing. She's just a silly little artist. She has no idea what's coming. The recording continued, and Jessica's voice, full of excitement, came through the speakers. We're going to be so rich, Liam. We're going to live like kings. I watched as Liam's composure crumbled. He was shaking, his eyes darting around the room, full of a terrified energy. He was no longer the confident, charming man who had abandoned me in the rain. He was a scared child, a puppet whose strings had been cut. His lawyer, a man who had seen it all, looked defeated. He knew the case was over. The judge ordered a recess to review the evidence. Liam was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor, and I was ready to face the world on my own terms. As I walked out of the courthouse, the media swarmed me, cameras flashing, microphones thrust into my face. Mrs. Mitchell, is it true your husband was a criminal? Did you set him up? Are you and your family seeking financial retribution? I didn't answer. I just walked through the crowd, my head held high, my eyes fixed on the horizon. The storm was over, and the sun was finally starting to shine. The rain had finally stopped, but the storm was still raging inside me. After Liam was led away in handcuffs, the courthouse felt impossibly quiet. I walked out into the cold air, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor, and I was ready to face the world on my own terms. My family's lawyers, led by Alex, met me at the car. Alex didn't say a word, but his eyes were full of a new kind of respect. He had seen me, not as the little sister who had run away, but as a woman who had fought for her life and won. He handed me a business card. "Call me," he said. "We need to talk." I took the card, but I didn't call. I had to find my own way, on my own terms. I went back to our empty apartment, the one Liam had been so sure was his, and packed my things. I threw out all the little things that reminded me of him, the photographs, the gifts, the clothes. I wanted to erase every trace of his existence from my life. It was a painful process, but it was also a cleansing one. I was finally free. I moved into a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I spent my days painting, writing, and going for long walks. I reconnected with old friends, and I began to heal. I was still a little broken, but I was also a lot stronger. I was a survivor, not a victim. A few weeks later, I got a call from a lawyer. Liam had been sentenced to 10 years in prison for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Jessica had been sentenced to 5 years. The judge had been harsh, but I didn't feel any sense of triumph. I just felt a sense of finality. It was over. A few months later, I received a letter. It was from Liam. I didn't want to read it, but I knew I had to. He had written about how he had been a victim of his own ambition and how he had been manipulated by his own family. He said he was sorry, and he asked for my forgiveness. I read the letter, and I felt nothing. No anger, no hatred, just a sense of emptiness. He was still a liar, even in prison. He still couldn't take responsibility for his own actions. I tore the letter up and threw it in the trash. It was over. He was no longer a part of my life. I decided to start a foundation for women who were victims of financial abuse. I wanted to help them. I wanted to give them a voice. I wanted to help them find their way out of the darkness and into the light. The foundation was small at first, but it grew quickly. I worked with lawyers and forensic accountants, and we helped dozens of women get their lives back. I was finally using my knowledge and my pain for a good cause. I started a blog, and I wrote about my experiences. I wrote about the gaslighting, the manipulation, and the betrayal. I wrote about my journey from victim to survivor. And I wrote about the importance of finding your own voice. My blog became a safe haven for women who were going through the same thing. They shared their stories, and we supported each other. We were a community of survivors, and we were all on a journey to heal. One day, I got an email from Jessica. She was in prison, and she had read my blog. She said she was sorry, and she asked for my forgiveness. She said she had been manipulated by Liam and his family, and she had lost everything. I wrote her back. I told her that I forgave her, but that I couldn't be a part of her life anymore. I had to protect myself, and I had to protect my heart. The years passed, and my foundation grew. It became a powerful force for good. A symbol of hope and healing. I was no longer Grace Mitchell, the victim. I was Grace Mitchell, the survivor, and I was finally free. One day, I got a call from Alex. He was in New York, and he wanted to see me. I agreed, and we met at a small coffee shop. We talked for hours, and we finally had the conversation we should have had years ago. We talked about our family, our father, and our strained relationship. He apologized for not being there for me, and I apologized for running away. We were finally a family again. He told me that Liam had been released from prison, and he had been working as a financial consultant. But he had not been able to find a job in finance, and he was struggling. His reputation had been destroyed, and he was a pariah. I didn't feel any sense of triumph. I just felt a sense of pity. He had lost everything, not because of me, but because of his own greed and his own lies. He was a cautionary tale, a reminder that every action has a consequence. I've learned a lot from this experience. I've learned that life is a journey, and that we all have our own storms to weather. I've learned that we're all survivors, in our own way, and that we're all capable of healing. I've learned that we're all on a journey to find our own voice and our own power. If you've ever felt small, manipulated, or trapped, remember this: the storm may be raging, but you have the power to weather it. You have the power to find your own voice and your own power. You have the power to turn your pain into purpose and your story into a force for good. So, if you want to find your own voice, your own power, and your own purpose, hit that subscribe button. Join our community of survivors, and together, we'll turn our pain into purpose. We'll turn our stories into a force for good. We'll turn our storms into a force for change. We'll turn our lives into a masterpiece of our own making. Join us, and let's turn our pain into power.